Hey everybody, it's been a minute since I've actually shown my face in one of these videos. For those of you who may be new, my name is Jake Terrio. This is Terrio Studios, and I just wanted to make this video for a couple of reasons. One, the title of the video that you've already read, you know what it's about. But I just wanted to talk briefly, a little bit of housekeeping about this channel, how it's evolved, where it's going, and more info that you probably don't care about. But let's shotgun it right now. Most of my creative output video-wise is happening over on Subpixel. It's a video game-focused channel where we do video essays, game recommendations, documentaries, a whole bunch of good stuff. But what's maybe more important to this video is that I've recently taken a role as a contributing reviewer at SFF Insiders, which is a community of literary enjoyers focused primarily, as the name would suggest, on sci-fi and fantasy. And as of the time of recording this video, I've reviewed a handful of books for them, all of which I'd recommend for various reasons. And those are, in order, Kazuna, or How to Lose a Spaceship and Still Go Places by Jamie Watt, The Apollo Murders by Chris Hadfield, Death's Daughter by Amber Benson, Dragon Teeth by Michael Crichton, and Our Lady of the Artilects by Andrew Gilsmith. But I don't just read science fiction and fantasy, which finally brings us back around to the original idea for this video, which was to talk about an unofficial trilogy of Peter Benchley books that I read and I loved and I wanted to dissect a little bit further. Those of you who may have been with this channel since around 2012-ish may remember our series Off the Shelf, in which me and a group of friends would review movies that we pulled off the shelf, so not new release movies, but stuff that we owned and loved and wanted to talk about. And as this channel has morphed and evolved, I think I really want to kind of mold it into a place where I can just talk about the art of storytelling in whatever unfocused, rambly way I might wish, as this video certainly will be. So with that in mind, we might formally call this the first episode of Off the Shelf Season 2, in which we will not just be confined to talking about movies, but we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to talk about books, we'll definitely talk about movies, maybe we'll talk about some video games. Just a place for people to come and unwind and sit and chat and talk about stories. With that out of the way, let's talk about the books. So me reading this trilogy of books that I want to talk about came about as part of research for a video that is currently in production at Subpixel. Maybe it'll be out by the time this video is done, but probably not. Where I kind of got a wild hair and I just wanted to read about the ocean for a bit. That started with what will be an honorary mention, but I won't be talking about too much here, but The Silent World by Jacques Cousteau, Captain Jacques Cousteau and Frédéric Dumas, about Cousteau's early explorations into the sea at the advent of his invention of the aqualung, which finally allowed people to kind of go into the ocean beyond snorkel depth. As I was reading that, I was reminded of the fact that though I love the Steven Spielberg film Jaws, I had never read Jaws. But though I hadn't ever read Peter Benchley's debut novel, I had absorbed a lot of Peter Benchley nonfiction over the years, primarily through National Geographic Home Video and National Geographic Magazine, for which Peter Benchley wrote several times over the years. But there was a VHS documentary, the name of which escapes me right now, I think maybe Search for the Great White or Quest for the Great White, which followed Peter Benchley kind of all over the world as he wanted to demystify the Great White. There was always a moment that stuck out to me where Peter Benchley says,
"It's almost as if this isn't the same animal that I wrote about a quarter of a century ago, and if there's one thing I know for dead certain, it's that I couldn't possibly write Jaws today. I could not turn this beautiful beast into a villain."
And I always thought that was kind of fascinating, how he made the great white shark out to be a monster, and then kind of spent the latter portion of his life trying to reverse the image that he created. And so that's what led me to finally reading Jaws for the very first time. I got the 30th anniversary edition, which has an introduction from Peter Benchley where he essentially restates what he said in the documentary, that he had researched the current academic thinking about great white sharks when he wrote this book, and then in the years since then learned more about the great white shark and could not in good conscience ever write about a fish like that ever again. Jaws is definitely interesting. It's got all the same beats as the movie, though sometimes in a different order. And it was interesting having read it and then thinking about, of course, in comparison to the film, that I think I like the movie more. One of the things Benchley mentions in the introduction is when he met with the producers of the film, when they were like, hey, we want to buy the rights, we want to make this movie, and we'll give you a shot at, writing the first draft of the screenplay, but take out this and take out that. Let's just do the fish story. And I think that in that instance, the removal of certain elements from the book does make the movie better. It's tighter, it's leaner, it's punchier, and it just makes for a very compelling film. Not that it isn't a very compelling book, but it does meander a little bit more in the novel. And you can certainly tell then, looking at some of Peter Benchley's later fiction, you can definitely tell that this was a debut. This was a first novel that, by Benchley's own admission, was written pretty haphazardly. All he had when he pitched the book to publishers was, hey, what if a great white shark terrorized a small community on the eastern seaboard? And then somebody said, oh yeah, let's do that. And then he had to figure out, oh, well, what's the story of that actually going to be? So if you've seen the movie and have not read the book, I would definitely recommend reading the book. It does have a little bit of 70s crust to it, some light misogyny, some light racism, and a romantic subplot which we will politely say is problematic. But once they get out onto the ocean and they're hunting the shark, it's firing on all cylinders, just like the movie does. And so that's Jaws. We may never get cover art this good ever again. And so the next book I want to talk about is 2002's Shark Trouble, which is Benchley basically distilling everything he's ever learned about sharks since writing Jaws, personal experiences, academic study, into one reference book. And this really is fascinating. It documents so many dives that he's been on with so many different kinds of sharks. The reason I want to include this one in this fake trilogy that I've come up with is because in it, Benchley talks about an encounter that he and some friends had in the Sea of Cortez in the mid-'80s with a manta ray. The encounter of which went on to inspire the third book that I want to talk about, which is The Girl of the Sea of Cortez. The reading order I would recommend, if you're going to read these three books, is to read Jaws first, and then read Shark Trouble, and then read The Girl of the Sea of Cortez, even though Girl of the Sea of Cortez came out in 1982, 20 years prior to Shark Trouble. And there's not really a lot more I have to say about Shark Trouble as a book. It's fascinating. Benchley's prose really shines through here. He talks about the ocean in such a romantic way that you would be forgiven for forgetting that this book is nonfiction and not actually stuff that he's inventing whole cloth. But that story about the manta ray in the Sea of Cortez is so beautiful, and then comes with a absolutely horrendous gut punch right at the end of it. That before I had even finished reading this book, I had ordered Girl of the Sea of Cortez because I had to know what kind of book had been spawned from that story. And so that then brings us to The Girl of the Sea of Cortez. Peter Benchley says this, both in Shark Trouble and elsewhere, that The Girl of the Sea of Cortez is his favorite novel that he ever wrote. And you can tell why when you read it. It is beautiful. The story of this teenage girl in Mexico who, lives in a little seaside village on the coast of the Sea of Cortez, who develops a friendship, essentially, with a manta ray. But a book of such a rich texture like this, about the sea and about the creatures that are in it, is only really possible to be written by someone like Peter Benchley, who has the lived experience. Like, there's stuff in this that I read that I could then think back to, oh, he talked about a dive exactly like that in Shark Trouble, or in a magazine article that he had written, where everything about this has such verisimilitude to it that, similarly to how you might be forgiven thinking that Shark Trouble is fiction, you might be forgiven for thinking The Girl of the Sea of Cortez is nonfiction. It is so hopeful and optimistic in a way that Shark Trouble, and then a lot of Benchley's kind of writing about sharks in his later years, was not fatalistic or doomsaying, but certainly he was very worried about the fate of sharks due to things like overfishing and sport fishing, where a good number of sharks are on various critically endangered lists. But The Girl of the Sea of Cortez is very much a hopeful book about the future of life in the ocean and about the future of our relationship to the ocean. And Benchley kind of implicitly advocates for eco-terrorism in this book. There's a flashback section in which Paloma, the protagonist, flashback in which her father blows up the boat of a group of fishermen who are dynamite fishing this local reef. And Benchley doesn't do anything but portray that as a deeply heroic act. So that's pretty cool. Of these three, I think similarly to Benchley, The Girl of the Sea of Cortez is my favorite. It's gorgeously written. It's very kind of meandering. Benchley has no trouble in the middle of a chapter just kind of wandering off into these long, very romantic, descriptive sections about the things that Paloma is witnessing in the sea. If you love the ocean, the texture of the ocean, thinking about and imagining the things that live within it, definitely pick up this. We'll see if, I'm like 20 minutes into recording now, we'll see how this shakes out in the edit, if there's anything here worth salvaging. That's my recommendation for an unofficial Peter Benchley trilogy: Jaws, Shark Trouble, and The Girl of the Sea of Cortez. I definitely want to do more videos like this, with books and games and movies. And if you want to read my reviews for explicitly science fiction and fantasy books, please go check out sffinsiders.com. You will see a great many reviews from me and a lot of other contributors. I've already discovered several new books and series that I'm eager to dive into. And maybe we'll get some guests on here in the future. I've got some hopes and dreams. And I guess if you'd like to see more like this, let me know down in the comments. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and you'll hear me talk about more storytelling stuff later. I have been Jake Terrio. This is Terrio Studios. This is off the shelf, I guess, if I end up deciding that it formally fits into that show. I'll see you next time.